Emma Walsh clutched her worn leather bag closer to her body as she navigated through the maze of cubicles in the towering headquarters of Meridian Enterprises. 6 months into her job as an administrative assistant, she still felt like an imposter in the gleaming glass building. Her navy blue thrift store blazer and sensible shoes stood in stark contrast to the designer outfits that surrounded her. At 25, Emma was barely making ends meet, supporting herself and helping with her mother's mounting medical bills while trying to finish her business degree at night school. "Morning, Emma," called Diane from reception, her perfectly manicured nails tapping away at her keyboard. "Mr. Harrison wants those quarterly reports on his desk before the board meeting at 11. Emma nodded, suppressing a yawn. She had been up until 2 a.m. completing an assignment, and her fatigue clung to her like a second skin. Still, she managed to smile. "Already on it. I just need to grab something from my desk first." Her tiny workspace was tucked away in a corner of the executive floor, strategically positioned to be at the beck and call of upper management. As she settled into her chair, Emma reached into her bag for her most precious possession, a worn burgundy leather-bound diary her father had given her before he passed away 5 years ago. Her heart skipped a beat when her fingers met empty space where the diary should have been. "No, no, no," she whispered, dumping the contents of her bag onto her desk. Keys, wallet, phone, lipstick, and crumpled receipts tumbled out, but no diary. A cold panic washed over her as she tried to retrace her steps from the previous day. The diary contained everything: her deepest thoughts, her dreams, her fears, and most dangerously, her unfiltered observations about Meridian Enterprises and its intimidating CEO, Alexander Harrison, the very man who could fire her with a single word if he ever discovered what she had written about him and the company. "Looking for something?" The deep voice from behind made Emma jump. She whirled around to find Marcus Chen, the company's marketing director, and one of the few friendly faces among the executives, leaning against her cubicle wall. "My diary," Emma admitted, her voice tight with worry. "I can't find it anywhere. I must have left it here yesterday." Marcus's expression softened. "I'll keep an eye out. When did you last have it?" Emma thought back to the previous afternoon. "I was making notes during the staff meeting in the main conference room. Then I had to rush to catch my evening class," she groaned. "It could be anywhere." "We'll find it," Marcus assured her, but the concern in his eyes mirrored her own. They both knew that in the cutthroat environment of Meridian, personal vulnerabilities were often exploited without mercy. Throughout the morning, Emma went through the motions of her job while discreetly searching every corner of the office. By lunchtime, desperation had set in. The diary wasn't just a collection of private thoughts. It was her last connection to her father, filled with conversations she continued to have with him long after he was gone. "Any luck?" Marcus asked, finding her rifling through the lost and found box in the break room. Emma shook her head, blinking back tears. "Nothing. I've looked everywhere." "Not everywhere," Marcus said quietly, nodding toward the executive wing. "Have you checked the conference room?" The main conference room was off limits except during meetings. It was where the board gathered, where million-dollar decisions were made, and where Alexander Harrison often worked alone when he wanted privacy. "I can't just walk in there," Emma whispered. "You can if you're delivering these," Marcus replied, handing her a stack of reports. "Harrison requested these 10 minutes ago. Perfect excuse to take a look around." With a grateful nod, Emma took the reports and made her way to the conference room, her heart hammering against her ribs. The door was slightly ajar, and she could see the imposing silhouette of Alexander Harrison standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to the door. Emma took a deep breath and knocked softly. "Mr. Harrison, I have those reports you requested." He turned, and Emma was once again struck by his commanding presence. At 42, Alexander Harrison had built Meridian from a struggling startup to a corporate giant. His dark hair was just beginning to silver at the temples, and his piercing blue eyes seemed to cut through pretense and falsehood with laser precision. He was known for his brilliant mind, his uncompromising standards, and his complete lack of patience for incompetence. "Leave them on the table," he said dismissively, already turning back to the window. Emma placed the reports down and quickly scanned the room, her heart sinking when she saw no sign of her diary. As she turned to leave, her eyes caught a glimpse of burgundy leather on Harrison's desk, partially covered by a folder. Her diary. She froze, torn between the desperate need to reclaim her private thoughts and the fear of drawing attention to it. If he hadn't opened it yet, she might be able to slip away with it unnoticed. But if he had, is there something else, Ms. Walsh? Harrison asked, turning back to face her with a raised eyebrow. No, sir, thank you, sir, Emma stammered, backing toward the door. She would have to find another way to retrieve it. Outside in the hallway, Emma leaned against the wall, trying to calm her racing heart. He has it, she whispered to Marcus when she returned to her desk. It's on his desk. Marcus winced. Did he seem different, like he might have read it? I couldn't tell, Emma replied, the knot in her stomach tightening. What am I going to do? That diary has everything in it, including what I really think about the company's treatment of junior staff, the questionable deal with Westridge Industries and— She lowered her voice to a whisper. What I wrote about him. What exactly did you write about Harrison? Marcus asked, his expression grave. Emma closed her eyes, remembering the words she had penned just days ago. I wrote that beneath his cold exterior, I believed there was a man trapped by expectations and past wounds. That sometimes, when he thinks no one is watching, I catch glimpses of profound loneliness in his eyes. And I wrote about the dream I had, where he and I— She couldn't finish the sentence, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. You need to get that diary back, Marcus said firmly. Today. For the rest of the afternoon, Emma watched Harrison's office like a hawk, waiting for an opportunity. At 5:30 p.m., she saw him leave for a meeting on another floor. This was her chance. With a silent prayer, Emma slipped into his office and approached his desk. The diary was gone. Panic rising, she carefully lifted papers and folders, searching desperately, looking for this. The voice from the doorway made her blood run cold. Alexander Harrison stood there, her burgundy diary in his hand, his expression unreadable. Mr. Harrison, I can explain, Emma began, but he cut her off with a raised hand. I believe this belongs to you, he said, walking toward her. I found it in the conference room yesterday evening. Emma reached for the diary, relief washing over her. But Harrison didn't release it immediately. The last entry, he said quietly, his eyes holding hers. The last line. Emma's heart stopped. The last line she had written just yesterday morning. If only he knew that behind his empire of glass and steel, I can see the man he truly is. And that man is the one I'm falling in love with. Harrison's hand trembled slightly as he released the diary to her, his composed facade cracking just enough for Emma to see something she had never witnessed before. Vulnerability. My office, 8 a.m. tomorrow, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We have much to discuss, Ms. Walsh. As Emma clutched the diary to her chest and hurried from his office, she couldn't decide whether she had just saved her job or lost it entirely. But one thing was certain. Tomorrow would change everything. Emma barely slept that night. Her tiny apartment, usually a sanctuary from the corporate world, felt like a prison of anxiety as she paced the worn hardwood floors. She had reread her diary entries a dozen times, cringing at her candid observations about Alexander Harrison. While she hadn't written anything malicious, she had been brutally honest about her perceptions of him, his defense mechanisms, the sadness she sometimes glimpsed beneath his stern exterior, and most mortifyingly, her growing feelings for him. This is professional suicide, she muttered to herself as she prepared for work the next morning, choosing her most professional outfit, a charcoal pencil skirt and white blouse that had seen better days. Her roommate Zoe watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee mug in hand. Maybe it's not as bad as you think, Zoe offered. You said he just asked for a meeting, right? He didn't fire you on the spot. That's probably because firing me would require paperwork, and Harrison hates inefficiency, Emma replied, attempting a weak joke. She checked her watch, 7:15 a.m. I should go. If I'm going to face my execution, I might as well be punctual. The morning commute passed in a blur. Emma arrived at Meridian's headquarters at 7:45, surprised to find the normally bustling building quiet, with only security and a few early risers present. As she rode the elevator to the executive floor, her diary safely tucked in her bag, Emma rehearsed what she would say. An apology, an explanation, or should she simply accept whatever consequences came her way with dignity? The executive floor was eerily silent. Emma walked slowly to Harrison's office, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor. His door was closed, but a soft light shone from underneath. Taking a deep breath, Emma knocked. "Come in," came the familiar voice, lacking its usual commanding tone. Emma entered to find Alexander Harrison, not behind his imposing desk, but standing by the window, a cup of coffee in hand. He was dressed impeccably as always in a tailored charcoal suit, but there was something different about him this morning, a hesitancy in his posture perhaps, or a softness around his eyes that she had never noticed before. "Ms. Walsh," he said, gesturing to a seating area in the corner of his office rather than the intimidating chairs facing his desk. "Please, sit down." Emma perched on the edge of a leather armchair, her back straight, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Harrison took the seat across from her, setting his coffee on the small table between them. "I imagine you didn't sleep well last night," he began, surprising her with his perceptiveness. "No, sir," Emma admitted, seeing no point in pretense. Harrison nodded, his eyes studying her face. "Neither did I." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Your diary, I want to apologize for reading it. I found it after hours, and I opened it looking for identification of its owner. Once I realized it was personal, I should have closed it immediately." "But you didn't," Emma said softly, finding unexpected courage. "No, I didn't." A flash of something, shame perhaps, crossed his face. "Once I saw my name, I continued reading. It was inexcusable, a violation of your privacy, and I'm sorry." Emma blinked, stunned by the apology. In 6 months at Meridian, she had never heard Alexander Harrison apologize to anyone. "Thank you for that," she managed to say. "I understand why you continued reading. Finding your name in an employee's diary would naturally raise concerns." Harrison leaned forward slightly. "What concerns me, Ms. Walsh, is not what you wrote about me, but that you see things in me that I've worked very hard to conceal." His voice dropped lower. "How is it that in 6 months as a junior assistant, you've observed what my board of directors hasn't seen in years?" Emma swallowed hard. "I pay attention, sir. It's part of my job to anticipate needs, to read between the lines, and maybe—" She hesitated, then pressed on. "Maybe I look for the humanity in people, even when they try to hide it." A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with unspoken thoughts. "You wrote about the Westridge deal," Harrison finally said, his tone carefully neutral. Emma's heart sank. Of course that would be his focus, not her embarrassing personal feelings. "Yes, sir. I expressed concerns about the ethical implications. I overstepped and I apologize." "No," Harrison said, surprising her again. "You were right." He stood abruptly, moving to retrieve a file from his desk. Returning to the seating area, he handed it to Emma. "This is confidential, but I want you to see it." With trembling hands, Emma opened the file to find a detailed report on Westridge Industries' labor practices, environmental violations, and questionable financial history. "I commissioned this investigation 3 weeks ago," Harrison explained. "The deal seemed too good to be true, and in my experience such things usually are. The board is pushing hard for this merger, citing the potential financial gains, but I've been looking for a way to kill it without revealing my hand too early." Emma looked up from the file, confused. "Why are you telling me this?" Harrison's blue eyes held hers steadily. "Because your diary entry about Westridge contained the same concerns I've had, based on nothing but observation and intuition. You wrote that during the presentation, the Westridge CEO avoided direct questions about their manufacturing facilities, and that their CFO seemed uncomfortable during discussions of their supply chain. You noticed what highly paid executives chose to ignore because of potential profits." Emma remembered writing those observations, never imagining they would be read by the CEO himself. "I didn't have proof. It was just a feeling." "Sometimes feelings are worth investigating," Harrison replied. He took a deep breath. "Which brings me to the other matter, your personal observations about me." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Mr. Harrison, I never intended for anyone to read those thoughts. They were private reflections, and I completely understand if you feel they cross a professional boundary. If you want my resignation—" "I don't want your resignation," he interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp. Then, more gently, "What I want is to understand how you could possibly see past everything I've built to protect myself." The vulnerability in his question caught Emma off guard. She had always imagined Alexander Harrison as impenetrable, untouchable. Now sitting across from her with uncertainty in his eyes, he seemed unexpectedly human. "Perhaps because I know something about building walls," Emma said carefully. "After my father died, I had to be strong for my mother, for my younger sister. I learned to compartmentalize, to separate emotion from necessity. I recognized the pattern in others. Harrison nodded slowly. Your father. You mentioned him often in your diary. He sounds like he was a remarkable man. He was, Emma said, a small smile touching her lips despite her nervousness. He taught literature at the community college. He believed in the power of stories to reveal truth, even when people try to hide it. And the diary was his gift to you, Harrison said. Not a question, but a statement of understanding. Yes, his last gift. A comfortable silence fell between them again, broken only when Harrison's phone buzzed with a reminder. The board meeting, he said, glancing at the screen. They're expecting a progress report on Westridge today. Emma rose, assuming the conversation was over, but Harrison remained seated. What would you do, Ms. Walsh, if you were in my position, faced with a board pushing for a profitable but potentially unethical merger? The question stunned her. I'm hardly qualified to advise you on corporate strategy, Mr. Harrison. I'm not asking the administrative assistant, he clarified. I'm asking the woman who sees beneath surfaces, who understands that business decisions have human consequences. Emma considered the question seriously. I would find a way to show them what you've discovered, but frame it as protection of Meridian's reputation and long-term interests rather than an ethical stance. Corporate boards understand risk management better than moral arguments. A slow smile spread across Harrison's face, transforming his features. Precisely what I was thinking. He stood, gathering the Westridge file. Would you like to see how it plays out? Sir? The board meeting. I'd like you to attend. Seeing her shocked expression, he added, as my strategic advisor on the Westridge matter. But I'm just an assistant, Emma protested. The board will never take me seriously. They will when they hear what you have to say, Harrison replied with unexpected conviction. You have insights that could be valuable to this company beyond your current role, Ms. Walsh. Or may I call you Emma? The shift to her first name, spoken in his deep voice, sent an unexpected warmth through her. Emma is fine, Mr. Harrison. Then you must call me Alexander, he replied, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. The meeting is in 30 minutes. That gives us just enough time to prepare our strategy. As Emma followed him to his desk, her mind reeling from the unexpected turn of events, she couldn't help but wonder if she was still asleep, dreaming this impossible scenario. Yet the solid presence of Alexander Harrison beside her, the subtle scent of his cologne and the very real flutter of her heart told her this was happening. Whatever came next, one thing was certain. The diary that she had feared would end her career had somehow opened a door she never imagined possible. The boardroom of Meridian Enterprises exuded power. 12 executives in impeccable suits sat around a gleaming mahogany table, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain as Emma took a seat beside Alexander. She felt painfully out of place among these corporate titans, keenly aware of her worn blazer and the whispers that followed her entrance. I believe most of you know my assistant, Emma Walsh, Alexander said smoothly, silencing the murmurs with a pointed glance. She'll be joining us today as we discuss the Westridge acquisition. Gerald Thornton, the silver-haired CFO, raised an eyebrow. Is that necessary, Alexander? This is a sensitive discussion. Ms. Walsh has provided valuable insights on this matter, Alexander replied, his tone brooking no argument. Insights I believe the board should hear. Emma felt the weight of 11 skeptical gazes. Only Marcus Chen, sitting across the table, offered an encouraging smile. She straightened her shoulders, remembering her father's words. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Emma. It's having something more important than fear. The meeting began with standard updates. Then, Alexander turned to the Westridge deal. Before we proceed further with this acquisition, there are concerning factors the board should consider. He nodded to Emma. Ms. Walsh, please share your findings. Heart pounding, Emma opened the folder before her. In reviewing the Westridge proposal, I identified several discrepancies in their financial reporting. She proceeded to outline the inconsistencies she had noticed during their presentations, connecting dots that painted a troubling picture. These are serious allegations based on very little evidence, interrupted Victoria Reeves, the sharp-tongued head of legal. No offense, Ms. Walsh, but what qualifies an administrative assistant to make such assessments? Emma met her gaze steadily. My observations are based on patterns, Ms. Reeves, patterns that warranted deeper investigation. She slid copies of Alexander's confidential report across the table. An investigation that confirmed my concerns. A heavy silence fell as the board members reviewed the documents. Gerald Thornton's face darkened as he turned each page. If these allegations are true, Westridge has deliberately misrepresented their financial position and operational practices, which makes them both a legal liability and a reputational risk, Emma added quietly. Meridian has built its success on integrity. Associating with Westridge could undermine decades of trust. Victoria Reeves studied Emma with new interest. Where did you study business, Ms. Walsh? I'm completing my business degree at night school, Emma replied, fighting the urge to shrink under the woman's penetrating gaze. But my observations come from working closely with the executive team and paying attention to details others might overlook. Alexander leaned forward. The question now is how we proceed. The deal as currently structured is unacceptable, but walking away entirely could be premature. What followed was 2 hours of intense discussion. Emma, initially relegated to the background, found herself repeatedly drawn in as executives sought her perspective. By the meeting's conclusion, the board had unanimously agreed to halt the acquisition, pending a complete audit of Westridge's operations. As the boardroom emptied, Gerald Thornton paused beside Emma's chair. Impressive work today, Ms. Walsh. It seems we've been underutilizing your talents. With a nod to Alexander, he departed. That went better than expected, Emma exhaled once they were alone. Alexander's smile held genuine warmth. You were remarkable. You stood your ground against some of the most intimidating minds in corporate America. Only because you gave me the platform, Emma replied, gathering her notes. Why did you trust me with this? Alexander considered her question. Because you trusted the page with truths no one else has had the courage to see. That kind of honesty is rare in this world. Their eyes met, and for a moment Emma forgot where they were. The boardroom, the corporate hierarchy, the professional boundaries that separated them. In that suspended moment, they were simply two people recognizing something extraordinary in each other. The spell broke when Alexander's phone chimed. It's a message from Westridge, he said, scanning the screen. Their CEO wants an emergency meeting this afternoon. They're sending their entire executive team. They're worried, Emma observed. They'll try to salvage the deal. Undoubtedly, Alexander agreed, and I want you there. The following weeks transformed Emma's position at Meridian. What began as a single boardroom appearance evolved into a series of strategy meetings, where her perspective was not only welcomed but sought. Alexander created an unofficial role for her as his special advisor, gradually reducing her administrative duties while increasing her involvement in strategic decisions. Not everyone embraced this change. Victoria Reeves remained skeptical, watching Emma with calculating eyes. Several executives questioned her rapid advancement, suggesting favoritism rather than merit. The whispers followed her through the hallways, sleeping her way to the top and Harrison's latest pet project. Emma tried to ignore them, focusing instead on proving her worth through results. She worked harder than ever, spending long evenings researching market trends and developing proposals that earned reluctant respect from even her harshest critics. You should take a break, Marcus advised one evening, finding her still at her desk well after 8. You've been working 16-hour days for weeks. I can't afford to slow down, Emma replied, rubbing her tired eyes. I need to prove I deserve this opportunity. Marcus perched on the edge of her desk. How are things with Harrison? The office gossip machine is working overtime. Emma sighed. It's not what people think. We work well together. He respects my ideas, that's all. But it wasn't all, and Emma knew it. Something had shifted between them since the diary incident, a current of understanding that went beyond professional collaboration. They never discussed the last line she had written, the confession of her feelings, yet it hung in the air during late-night strategy sessions and quiet moments when their eyes met across conference tables. Be careful, Emma, Marcus said gently. Harrison has a reputation. 4 years ago, there was an analyst named Sophia who rose quickly under his mentorship. When things ended badly, she left the company. No one's heard from her since. Emma frowned. What exactly are you implying? Just that patterns exist for a reason, Marcus replied, his expression unreadable. Harrison finds talent, nurtures it, and then he let the sentence hang unfinished. The warning lingered in Emma's mind as she gathered her things. She had nearly reached the elevator when she heard raised voices from Alexander's office. Hesitating, she moved closer to the partially open door. "The board is concerned about your judgment, Alexander," Gerald Thornton was saying. "First the Westridge deal. Now this infatuation with an unqualified assistant. Emma Walsh has proven her value to this company repeatedly," Alexander replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Perhaps, but your personal interest in her raises questions. We can't afford another Sophia situation." Emma froze, Marcus's warning echoing in her mind. "That was different," Alexander said sharply. "You know very well what happened with Sophia was—" "I know what you claim happened," Gerald interrupted. "But perception matters in our position. The board wants assurance that your relationship with Ms. Walsh is strictly professional." There was a long pause before Alexander responded. "My relationship with Emma is my business, Gerald. Her contribution to Meridian speaks for itself." "Be that as it may," Gerald continued, "we've decided to offer her a position in our Singapore office, an opportunity that removes any appearance of impropriety while acknowledging her potential." Emma's heart sank. Singapore, halfway around the world from her ailing mother, her night classes, her life. "You're testing my patience, Gerald." Alexander's voice had dropped dangerously low. "And you're testing the boards. Remember, Alexander, you may be CEO, but you still answer to us. Make this happen, or we'll be forced to reconsider your continued leadership." Emma backed away from the door, mind racing. Singapore wasn't an opportunity. It was exile, a convenient way to remove a perceived problem. She hurried to the elevator, emotions warring within her. Had she been naive? Was she simply another in a pattern of employees Alexander elevated then discarded? The next morning, Emma arrived early, determined to confront Alexander before the day's meetings. His office was empty, but a folder sat on his desk with her name on it. Inside was a formal offer for a senior strategic advisor position in Meridian's Singapore office. "It's quite the opportunity," Victoria Reeves said from the doorway, making Emma jump. "Most employees work years for international placement." Emma turned, clutching the folder. "Did you know about this?" Victoria stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. "The board believes it's the best solution for everyone involved, particularly Alexander." "What happened with Sophia?" Emma asked directly. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes, surprise perhaps that Emma knew the name. "Sophia Winters was brilliant, like you. She became indispensable to Alexander, both professionally and personally. When their relationship soured, it threatened his position. The board intervened. And now you're intervening again," Emma concluded. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Consider Singapore a lifeboat, Emma. When powerful men like Alexander Harrison face a choice between their career and their heart, career wins every time. I've seen it happen repeatedly." "You make it sound like there's a pattern," Emma said slowly. "Oh, there is," Victoria replied. "Sophia wasn't the first, merely the most problematic. There was Rebecca before her and Alison before that, bright young women who caught Alexander's attention, rose quickly, then disappeared when complications arose." She moved closer, her voice dropping. "Did you really believe you were special? That your insights were so extraordinary? Alexander cultivates talent he finds attractive, Emma. It's what he does." The words hit Emma like physical blows, each one chipping away at the trust she had built with Alexander. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because unlike my colleagues, I actually admire your potential," Victoria said. "Take Singapore. Build your career away from Alexander's shadow. Otherwise, you'll end up like the others, a footnote in Meridian's history." Victoria left her alone with the offer letter and a mind full of doubts. Everything Emma had believed about her relationship with Alexander now seemed suspect. Had her diary really revealed insights he valued, or had it simply offered him an opportunity, a vulnerable young woman with obvious feelings for him? When Alexander finally arrived, Emma was waiting, the Singapore offer on his desk between them. "You weren't supposed to see that yet," he said, closing the door. "I wanted to discuss it with you first." "Like you discussed it with the board," Emma countered. "Or did they discuss it with you?" Alexander's expression tightened. "It's complicated, Emma." "Then uncomplicate it," she demanded, finding strength in her anger. "Tell me about Sophia Winters, and Rebecca and Alison." He stilled, his face unreadable. "Where did you hear those names? Does it matter? Were they, like me, naive enough to believe they were valued for their minds rather than their availability? You don't understand? Then make me understand," Emma interrupted, emotion breaking through her composure. Was any of this real, Alexander? Or am I just another in your pattern? Alexander stepped toward her, but Emma backed away, unwilling to let his proximity cloud her judgment. I need the truth, she said quietly. All of it. Before he could answer, his assistant knocked urgently. Mr. Harrison, the Westridge CEO is here with his lawyers. They're threatening legal action over the cancelled acquisition. Alexander's gaze remained fixed on Emma, conflict evident in his eyes. We'll continue this later, he finally said. Will we? Emma asked. Or will I find myself on a plane to Singapore before we have the chance? Without waiting for his response, she gathered her things and walked out, her certainty crumbling with each step. The diary that had once revealed her heart now seemed like a betrayal by her own hand, exposing vulnerabilities to a man who collected and discarded bright young women as part of his corporate strategy. As Emma passed the conference room, she glimpsed the Westridge executives, their expressions triumphant rather than defensive. Something wasn't right. Following an instinct, she slipped into the adjacent room where she knew the audio feed from all conference rooms was monitored. What she heard in the next 30 minutes changed everything and revealed a truth more shocking than anything she could have imagined. Through the audio feed, Emma listened as the Westridge CEO, James Caldwell, spoke with chilling confidence. I think you'll find our position quite strong, Alexander, Caldwell was saying. Your board seems conflicted about your leadership lately. Gerald Thornton has been particularly communicative. What exactly are you implying, James? Alexander's voice was controlled, but Emma could hear the tension underneath. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Your CFO has been feeding us information for months. Board concerns, your fixation with a certain employee, the names of those who might be persuaded to vote against you. Gerald has been quite thorough. Emma's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Gerald Thornton was working with Westridge against Alexander. I assume you have proof of these allegations, Alexander said coldly. Of course. We record everything, Alexander. Insurance, you understand. Would you like to hear Gerald offering us details about your previous indiscretions? Sophia Winters, wasn't it? He made her sound quite unstable. The recording played, and Emma heard Gerald Thornton's distinctive voice. Harrison has a weakness for damaged women he can save. Sophia Winters threatened to go public about their relationship. We handled it, relocated her, paid her off. We'll do the same with this Walsh girl. Handled it? Alexander's voice had turned dangerous. What exactly did you do to Sophia? Nothing she didn't agree to, Caldwell replied smoothly. But enough reminiscing. Here's our proposal. You approve the Westridge acquisition on our original terms, and these recordings never reach your board or the press. Everyone wins. Except Meridian's shareholders when Westridge's practices come to light, Alexander countered. By then, it will be too late, and you'll be long gone, your reputation in tatters. The board already questions your judgment regarding Ms. Walsh. Imagine if they heard you defending her to Gerald last night. Emma had heard enough. She needed evidence, something concrete to take to the board. Looking around the monitoring room, she spotted a USB drive and quickly saved copies of the conversation. As she hurried from the room, she nearly collided with Marcus. Emma, what are you doing in there? His eyes narrowed suspiciously. Marcus, I need your help, she said urgently. Gerald Thornton is working with Westridge against Alexander. They're blackmailing him. Marcus pulled her into an empty office. Slow down. What exactly did you hear? Emma explained the conversation, showing him the USB drive. We need to get this to the board immediately. Marcus frowned, taking the drive from her hand. If what you're saying is true, this is serious corporate espionage. But, he hesitated, why are you helping Alexander after everything Victoria told you about Sophia and the others? Because something doesn't add up, Emma replied. I need to know the truth, not just rumors and innuendo. Marcus studied her face. You're still in love with him, aren't you? Despite everything. Emma didn't answer directly. Will you help me or not? After a long moment, Marcus sighed. I'll arrange an emergency board meeting. But Emma, be prepared for this to backfire. Corporate politics are brutal, and you're still just an assistant in their eyes. Not anymore, Emma said firmly. While Marcus made calls, Emma returned to her desk to find a small package waiting. Inside was a thumb drive with a note in Alexander's handwriting. The truth about Sophia, in case I'm not here to explain. Heart pounding, Emma plugged in the drive. What she found shattered everything Victoria had told her. The files contained emails, recordings, and legal documents showing that Sophia Winters had discovered financial irregularities involving Gerald Thornton and several board members 5 years ago. When she brought her concerns to Alexander, they began building a case quietly, but someone had tipped off Gerald. Sophia was offered a choice, a lucrative position abroad or professional destruction. Alexander had fought to protect her, nearly losing his own position in the process. The final document was a letter from Sophia, dated 3 months ago. Alexander, my contract in Tokyo is finally ending. The golden handcuffs Gerald placed on me expire next month. I'm writing to warn you. I've heard whispers that Gerald is working with Westridge Industries. Be careful. They use the same tactics we uncovered years ago. I never blamed you for what happened. You tried to protect me, at great risk to yourself. For that, I remain grateful. Sophia. There had been no affair, no pattern of manipulation. Alexander had been protecting whistleblowers, not discarding lovers. Emma closed the files, a strange calm settling over her. The board meeting Marcus arranged was in 30 minutes, just enough time to find Alexander. She hurried to the conference room where he was still facing Caldwell and the Westridge team. Through the glass wall she could see Alexander standing alone against 5 men, his posture unbending despite being outnumbered. The sight strengthened her resolve. Emma knocked and entered without waiting for permission, ignoring the annoyed glances from the Westridge executives. Mr. Harrison, the board has called an emergency meeting, she announced, her voice steady. Your presence is required immediately. Alexander's eyes searched hers, looking for meaning behind her interruption. She gave him the slightest nod, hoping he would understand. Gentlemen, it seems we'll have to continue this discussion later, Alexander said, gathering his papers. This is highly irregular, Caldwell protested. We had an understanding. No, Mr. Caldwell, Alexander interrupted. We had a conversation, nothing more. In the hallway, Emma quickly explained what she had discovered. Alexander listened intently, his expression darkening when she mentioned Sophia's letter. I was going to tell you everything today, he said quietly. Before Gerald forced the Singapore offer, I never wanted you to doubt what's been growing between us. I know that now, Emma replied. But we don't have time for personal matters. The board is waiting. The boardroom fell silent when they entered together. Gerald Thornton's face registered brief surprise before settling into practiced neutrality. Victoria Reeves watched with shrewd attention. Marcus stood by the presentation screen, the USB drive ready. What is the meaning of this emergency session? Gerald demanded. Illumination, Emma replied, taking control of the meeting before Alexander could speak. She nodded to Marcus, who started the audio recording of Caldwell's blackmail attempt. The board members listened in growing horror as Gerald's betrayal unfolded in his own voice. When the recording ended, Emma plugged in Alexander's drive, displaying evidence of Gerald's past manipulation of Sophia Winters and others. For years, Mr. Thornton has been using his position to enrich himself at Meridian's expense, Emma stated. He created false narratives about Mr. Harrison's relationships with employees who discovered his schemes, including Sophia Winters, who was silenced and sent to Tokyo. Gerald surged to his feet. This is preposterous. You can't possibly believe the fabrications of an administrative assistant. Former administrative assistant, Alexander interjected calmly. As of this morning, Ms. Walsh is Meridian's new Director of Strategic Integrity, reporting directly to this board, not to me. Emma's head whipped toward him in surprise. It was the first she'd heard of such a position. A position created without board approval? Victoria questioned. The CEO has authority to create director-level positions in response to corporate emergencies, Alexander replied. I'd say blackmail and sabotage qualify. Unless the board objects. The silent exchange of glances around the table told Emma all she needed to know. No one would stand with Gerald now, not with such damning evidence before them. Within hours, security was escorting Gerald Thornton from the building. The Westridge deal was permanently cancelled, and an internal investigation was launched into all of Gerald's past dealings. As the dust settled, Emma found herself in Alexander's office, standing before the windows where their journey had begun weeks earlier with a lost diary. Director of Strategic Integrity? She asked. Is that even a real title? Alexander smiled, the tension of the day finally easing from his shoulders. It is now. Meridian needs someone whose moral compass points true north, someone who sees beneath surfaces and has the courage to speak truth to power. Even when that power is you? Emma challenged gently. Especially then. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of grey in his blue eyes. Emma, about what you wrote in your diary. Please, she interrupted, embarrassment flooding her. You don't need to address that. It was private, not meant for anyone else. But it was true, Alexander said softly, as was what I felt when I read it. What I still feel. Emma's heart stuttered. And what is that exactly? Recognition, he answered, of someone who sees me. Not the CEO, not the corporate image, but me. He took her hand, his touch sending warmth through her veins. I've spent years building walls to protect myself in this world. You wrote them all down in your diary. Every defense mechanism, every scar. And still somehow you found something beneath worth caring about. I did, Emma admitted. I do. The board will talk, Alexander warned. There will be whispers, accusations of favoritism. Let them talk, Emma replied with newfound confidence. My position reports to the board, not to you, remember? My work will speak for itself. Alexander's smile deepened. I have no doubt, but there's still the question of us, of what happens outside these office walls. If you want there to be an us, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here. A lost diary, a moment of vulnerability, layers of deception peeled away to reveal unexpected truth. She thought about her father's words written in the front of that diary. Truth is rarely simple, Emma, but it's always worth pursuing. I think, she said slowly, that we've both spent too long letting other people define our stories. I'd like to write this next chapter together and see where it leads. I'd like that too, Alexander replied, his hand tightening around hers. 6 months later, Emma stood on the balcony of Alexander's penthouse, watching the city lights shimmer below. Her diary lay open beside her, filled with new entries chronicling the transformation of her life, her promotion to the board of directors after uncovering 3 more corruption schemes within Meridian, her completion of her business degree, and the deepening of her relationship with Alexander, now conducted openly and without apology. Sophia Winters had returned from Tokyo to testify against Gerald, who now faced criminal charges. She and Emma had formed an unexpected friendship, bound by their shared experience of standing for truth against powerful opposition. Writing again? Alexander asked, joining her on the balcony with 2 glasses of wine. Always, Emma smiled, accepting the glass. I'm keeping a record of how a lost diary changed everything. Not the diary, Alexander corrected, his eyes warm as they met hers. The woman who wrote it. The woman brave enough to see truth and speak it, regardless of consequence. Emma leaned into his embrace, reflecting on the journey from poor assistant to trusted executive, from woman with a crush to equal partner. Her diary had been lost, then found, revealing not just her heart but a path forward she could never have imagined. To truth, she said, raising her glass. To us, Alexander responded, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. As they stood together under the vast night sky, Emma thought about the last line she had written in her diary that morning. Sometimes losing something precious leads to finding something even more valuable, the courage to become who you truly are. She had lost a diary and found herself, and in that discovery she had gained everything.